How do we live? It seems to me the fundamental and essential question of life. How do we live? When I was growing up, I was always looking for answers everywhere. Look over here, look over there, listen to my parents' opposing advice. I was looking for a set of guidelines as to what to do in life. What would I do? But I couldn't find anything. It was sort of a pastiche work of a little bit of this and a little bit of that together. I would ask myself, what would I do when people derided me, mocked me, shunned me, lied to me? Would I do exactly what they did? Would I mirror their behavior? Or would I take the high road, whatever that was? But I couldn't find an answer. Fortunately, I realized early on that I was born an artist, and that began to give me a form of expression, a way to reflect the world, engage with the world, and really contend with the world and life and the hands that it would deal me. It gave me a way to actually be vulnerable in the world, and it would actually allow me to connect with people and communicate with them. I found beauty through art. As the artist Dorothea Lange says, beauty appears when one has felt deeply. Beauty appears when one has felt deeply. This was my way into the world. I would put life through the filter of art, or vice versa, and out would come something else, something of beauty, hopefully. I discovered this idea of putting something through a process and out coming something else through my work in literary translation, which I stumbled upon by accident. But when I found translation, it felt like home. It felt to me that my divided and plural self had now found an expression, having an Iranian background. So I translate from the Persian language, also known as Farsi, into English. But I not only translate literary texts, I also make multimedia projects from them. As is the case here, Icarus Rise is the multimedia performative collaborative expression of my first book, Belonging, which is a collection of poems by the Iranian diaspora in my translation. Here are some images from the performance of Icarus Rise. By engaging other artists and collaborating with them, I would not only bring the invisible voices that had appeared in translation to them, but also to their audiences by extension. This was an excellent formula for me to address the invisibility of Iranian culture in the English language in the West here. This is another project, the Persian Rite of Spring. It's bringing together the folklore and the classical poetry and the mythology and the contemporary practices together and remixing them and telling the story of the Persian New Year, which happens on the spring equinox. Then I expanded my translation into the classical musical world. I began working as a librettist, which is the person who writes the story and the sung text in classical musical works. In this project, Fire Angels, I was able to bring together ancient Zoroastrian texts in translation, as well as some 20th century poetry, remix them, create new characters, and tell the story of 9/11 with a new story. And this project was performed in the 10th anniversary year of 9/11. Here as well, actually, at Cal Performances. As well, I went into opera. During this artist residency, creating one of my first starter operas, I introduced the iconic Iranian poet Ahmad Shamlou into the conversation. The drama of this opera happens as a fight about the iconic Iranian poet Ahmad Shamlou. Shamlou was a poet, translator, encyclopedist, cultural icon, and the person mainly responsible for taking classical poetic forms all the way to free verse in the Persian language. He is an enduring figure who I knew personally from his participation in my parents' literary salons in Tehran after the 1979 revolution. He animated my life. He brought world culture and music and art and poetry into our already literary and cultured home. He brought me the world. He was nominated for the Nobel Prize in 1984, but do we know his work here in the West? No. So, in 2014, as I was in the early stages of creating 2 projects inspired by his work and about Ahmad Shamlou, I experienced a silencing, an act of professional sabotage. This happens in 2014, and this is the first time I'm speaking about it publicly. It devastated me, and I went into an abyss of darkness, completely incapable of functioning. I couldn't understand, not only was it devastating to me personally, but I couldn't understand why the project of introducing this world-class figure to us here in the West would be halted and sabotaged. The despair that I went into is indescribable, the silencing and what it does to the soul. But the entire time I was in that dark abyss, I knew that I would come out of it, and I would not be defeated. Neither would the project of bringing Ahmad Shamlou to you in the West be a defeated project. I knew that walking through that crucible would only have to have one ending and one response, and that was to create beauty. So I waited and waited and waited through being completely dysfunctional and non-functional, knowing that time would heal and I would resurrect. When I did, I began working again. I began translating Shamlou's poetry again. And as I was in the middle of translating his work and creating the opera again that had been halted, I was really captured by one of his books. And it's called Abraham in Flames, Ebrahim dar Atash. This book is animated by the biblical story of young Abraham, who was thrown into the fire for believing in the one true God. And Abraham sits in the fire, completely calm, only his chains are melting, and he emerges and walks out of the fire, face illuminated like gold. These are 2 depictions of many depictions of this story. This one from the Hebrew Bible, and this one from Persian miniatures. Shamlou adapted this metaphor for his seminal 1974 book, Abraham in Flames. He used it as a metaphor to write poems about freedom fighters who had risked their lives and committed to their truths, and they were falling to earth to their bloody deaths. And the book is full of images of fields of flower rising from the bloodshed. So I took this metaphor of walking through a fire and emerging from it, as well as a very specific version of the story of a question that my father had asked me one winter afternoon at a window. It's a version of the question that we all grapple with, how to live. I took these 2 with many, many, many other sources of inspiration, and I began working again. My book, Self-Portrait in Bloom, tells the story of the silencing in a much larger story. And it is a story that's animated by these images of surviving, triumphing, not accepting defeat, and being the authors of our lives, the architects of our stories. Other people do not have the control of our lives. We have the control of our lives. This book also contains Shamlou's poetry in translation. I also resumed working on the opera. The opera we have broken with the traditional notions of opera, and we have written an opera for girls' chorus as the main character. The girls' chorus here is sung by the Young Women's Chorus of San Francisco, the staggering young artists, and it is about their character, every girl, being tugged at and taunted by various forces to find her agency and truth in the world. I've brought you a little teaser of the opera in our composer Alexandra Rabalov, and these images are by Devlin Shand. This is the moment after which every girl has been defeated and has been shattered or tried to be shattered by the forces of devastation and fear. I now think of it as a gift, the silencing. I think it's the reason why I'm here now with you today, with two incredibly ambitious projects that literally took blood and took me to the verge of death to create. But they are created. All of us have incredible reservoirs of strength inside us that we may not even be aware of. We are all incredible hulks inside these little shells. So next time you are shattered, know that by having felt deeply, you have already become beauty. And know that the only response to life, the best way that we could respond to the big question of how do we live, is to create beauty. Thank you.